So in today's cosplay video, we'll be looking at Moongrum, a Carian knight of rare Lucaria, who is known for his frame perfect parries and immaculate drip. And in this video, we'll be looking at his equipment, taking it out for a spin, and seeing whether or not we can improve on his loadout to compete with the meta. But like the video, and give it to me bite-sized. So Moongrum wears the Carian knight set, which is one of the best looking sets in the game, giving us decent defense across the board, with our poise being somewhat less than I would prefer. There's not much to say on the armor, but for our weapons, we have a few pieces at our disposal, mainly the Carian Knight sword, which comes with the weapon art Carian Grandeur, which charges up a magical greatsword, which you can unleash on enemies for massive damage. The Carian shield comes with Carian retaliation, which can deflect spells and regular attacks, and we have the Academy staff, which will be used to cast Carian Piercer. I've opted for these stats, splitting our strength and intelligence on the level 137 astrologer, as our equipment benefits from both of those stats. So taking this out for a spin, let's address the elephant in the room. If you're good at parrying, then you will have no problem with this build, as Carian retaliation is pretty effective compared to your standard parry. But looking at PvE, if you can't parry, then you still have a shield that can block incoming damage, alongside a sword that deals okay damage but comes with one of the best weapon arts for PvE, allowing you to dish out massive damage with a gigantic greatsword. This is super effective against slow and large enemies, and struggles against quicker enemies who can get a hit in before you charge. We also have Carian Piercer, which can knock down humanoid enemies or deal pretty good damage against enemies from a medium distance if fully charged. Then for PvP, our weapon art Carian Grandeur is less viable due to the long wind-up times, so it's often worth partially charging it if you can get your timing right, or going in for a parry if you've got the skill. But outside of that, our options are limited to sword swings, in which we have access to a brilliant heavy attack that guards and follows up with a delayed slash, and of course our Carian Piercer, which is very useful for catching opponents who roll or who are just outside of your attack range. Now an obvious downside is that we only have access to one spell, and no ranged ones at that, severely limiting our playstyle unless we can parry an incoming spell for the Carian retaliation. We also don't have any talismans, which is a waste of slots, so let's make some adjustments. I'm going to keep our drip the same and add in another Carian Knight sword, which will give us access to an extremely powerful and responsive power stance moveset. This will make the build a bit more viable for people who can't parry, and helps us to compensate for our less than ideal damage and very situational weapon art. Next, I'll throw in some additional spells to help spice things up, and I've opted to keep the theme with the sword style attacks, which means using Carian Phalanx, which is a ranged option, Carian Piercer, Carian Greatsword, and Carian Slicer. Then for our talismans, we've got the Claw Talisman to boost our jump attack damage, Militant's Prophecies for the damage boost, and this will stack with our Rotten Sword insignia, and finally our Magic Scorpion Charm. I've also updated the stats to increase our intelligence on the level 137 astrologer. And this would give us much better results, as our power stance swords are a deadly combination, allowing us to dish out quick punishment on an aggressive playstyle while maintaining access to the rest of our loadout. If we swap to our shield, we can still utilize our parrying and blocking, allowing us to counter spellcasters or slower weapons which tend to be easier to parry. And of course, we now have 4 spells, each with their own attack speed, range, and damage, and this is useful for staying unpredictable while having some options to deal with your opponent. Of course, if you want to stay truly authentic to Moongrum, then parry your opponents with frame perfect precision. But to wrap things up, I'll leave you with some arena battles and a boss fight so you can see the build in its entirety. But of course, leave your comments below and subscribe. This is Bite-Sized Otaku, and I hope you enjoyed.